By the time the minister asked if anyone had a reason this marriage should not go forward, nobody in that cathedral expected the answer to come from the back of the room. The music had already faded. The bride was smiling. The cameras were fixed on Kingston Vale, the polished real estate heir who had spent the last 3 years rebuilding his image in Atlanta's high society after a messy divorce the tabloids blamed on his unstable ex-wife. Everything about that morning had been designed to feel expensive, controlled, and untouchable. The white roses had been flown in from Ecuador. The guest list included city officials, investors, church leaders, and the kind of people who only showed up when there was power in the room. Kingston wanted this wedding to do more than make him a husband again. He wanted it to erase a past he had buried with money, press statements, and silence. Then the church doors opened. At first, only a few people turned around. Then the entire room shifted. A woman stood in the doorway, wearing a dark green gown, her shoulders straight, her chin lifted, her expression calm in the kind of way that only comes from surviving pain so deep it no longer needs to scream. On either side of her stood 2 little boys in matching black suits, each holding one of her hands. They looked no older than 6. Their faces were serious. Their posture was perfect. And even from halfway across the sanctuary, the resemblance was impossible to miss. The groom's color dropped so fast, it looked like somebody had pulled the blood right out of his face. The bride looked from him to the boys and back again. The woman took 1 step forward, then another, heels soft against marble, while whispers spread through the cathedral like fire through dry leaves. Because everybody in that room knew her. Zariah Bennett, the ex-wife Kingston had once called bitter, manipulative, and desperate for attention. The same woman he had publicly denied when rumors surfaced years earlier that she had given birth to twin boys he refused to claim. And now, here she was, walking straight toward the altar with those same boys beside her, while the man who had destroyed her name stood frozen in front of God, his new bride, and every wealthy witness he had invited to celebrate his fresh start. But Zariah had not come there to beg. She had come there to end something. The minister stepped back before anyone asked him to. One of Kingston's groomsmen moved as if he meant to intercept her, but the family attorney rose from the front pew and lifted a hand. Let her through. That was when the room changed. Not from scandal to confusion, from confusion to fear. Because when the family attorney sided against Kingston Vale on the day of his own wedding, everybody understood that whatever was about to happen had been brewing long before the doors opened. Kingston swallowed hard and forced his voice to work. Zariah, he said, trying to sound calm and failing. This is not the place. She kept walking. No, she said quietly. This is exactly the place. You made me a public lie, so today the truth gets to meet your audience. A sharp gasp moved across the pews. The bride, Celeste Monroe, lowered her bouquet. She had come into the Vale family shining like a trophy, wealthy, polished, connected, the daughter of a hotel magnate whose money and political relationships made Kingston's future look bigger than it had ever looked with Zariah. She had always worn certainty the way some women wore diamonds. But in that moment, certainty cracked right across her face. Kingston stepped down from the altar. You need to leave. Zariah stopped only when she was close enough for the front rows to see the boys clearly. One had Kingston's eyes. The other had his exact mouth. The resemblance was cruel in its precision. "I left when you told the world I was nothing," she said. "I'm only back because your grandfather made sure this day would come." Every head in the cathedral turned toward the attorney. The old man adjusted his glasses, removed a sealed envelope from his briefcase, and said, "Before his passing, Mr. Augustus Vale instructed this firm to interrupt any future marriage ceremony involving his grandson if certain documents remained unacknowledged by that date." The bride's father stood up. "What is this?" The attorney did not even look at him. "The truth," he said. And with that, Kingston's perfect morning began to unravel in front of everyone who mattered. 6 years earlier, before the whispers, before the blogs, before Kingston learned how easily a man could protect his image by sacrificing the woman who loved him, there had been a different version of them. Back then, Kingston was ambitious, charming, and still hungry enough to listen. Zariah was the sharp one, the steady one, the woman who could walk into a room full of bankers and make them rethink every number on the table without ever raising her voice. They met at a development conference in Charlotte, where Kingston was still trying to prove he was more than his last name, and Zariah was already building a reputation as a financial strategist who could rescue failing projects nobody else wanted to touch. He fell first. Not because she chased him. Zariah never chased anything that needed convincing. He fell because she made him better. During their first 2 years together, she helped him stabilize debt exposure in one of his father's collapsing commercial projects. She showed him how to negotiate without bluffing, how to plan 3 moves ahead, how to stop confusing charm with leadership. When they got married, people said Kingston had married above himself in every way except money. That sentence haunted his mother from the start. Evelyn Vale had spent her whole life treating relationships like transactions disguised as manners. To her, Zariah's intelligence was useful, but her independence was dangerous. Evelyn wanted a daughter-in-law who admired the Vale name more than she valued her own. Zariah had never been that woman. She was respectful, never loud, never rude, but she was impossible to control. And when year after year passed without a baby, Evelyn found the weakness she had been waiting for. At first, it came in small comments. Little remarks over dinner about legacy, bloodlines, family names, and how empires didn't build themselves just to die in paperwork. Then came the fertility specialists, the private consultations, the supplements, the secret prayers disguised as concern. Zariah endured all of it because she loved Kingston enough to believe they were still on the same side. But pressure does strange things to weak men wearing expensive suits. Kingston stopped seeing her pain and started measuring her by it. He became colder after every doctor's visit, more distant after every family dinner. Then he started coming home late, smelling like cologne she had never bought him, speaking in rehearsed half-truths, holding his phone face down like a man trying to protect a second life. Zariah did not accuse him at first. She watched. She listened. She paid attention. And one rainy Thursday night, that attention gave her the answer. She had returned early from a conference in Dallas with takeout from his favorite steakhouse, thinking maybe they still had something worth rescuing. But when she pulled into the circular driveway, she saw another car already there. A pearl-white Bentley she had seen before at one of his fundraising dinners. Celeste Monroe's car. Zariah did not rush inside. She walked, slowly, quietly, like a woman whose heart already knows the truth and only needs her eyes to catch up. When she entered the house, she heard laughter from the sunroom. Kingston's laughter. Low, relaxed, intimate. The kind he had not given her in months. Then she saw them. Celeste, barefoot on the tile, wearing one of Zariah's robes. Kingston pouring champagne as if betrayal deserved bubbles. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Kingston did what cowards do best. He got angry at being discovered. "It's not what you think," he said first, because weak men always begin with insultingly bad lies. Then, when he realized she wasn't going to scream, he changed tactics. "Maybe this happened because you stopped acting like my wife." That one landed harder than the affair. Zariah set the takeout bag on the counter and asked the only question that mattered. "How long?" Celeste looked away. Kingston did not. "Long enough to know I'm tired," he said. "Tired of waiting. Tired of pretending this marriage still has a future." Zariah stared at him, almost amused by how quickly a man can confuse his guilt with courage. "So this is your future?" she asked. "A woman with money and timing?" His jaw tightened. "You know what my family needs." There it was. Not love, not honesty, not repentance. An heir. As if a child were not a life, but a trophy that proved a man's name deserved to continue. The divorce moved fast after that. Too fast. Kingston's legal team buried everything in confidentiality language. Bloggers got anonymous tips describing Zariah as emotionally unstable and obsessed with keeping access to the Vale family lifestyle. She said almost nothing in response, which the public interpreted as weakness. In reality, silence was the only piece of dignity she had left that nobody could invoice. Then, 2 months after the divorce papers were finalized, Zariah fainted in the middle of a strategy meeting. At the hospital, she expected stress, exhaustion, maybe anemia. What she did not expect was a doctor smiling in disbelief before saying, "Ms. Bennett, you're pregnant, and not with one baby. Twins." For a full minute, she thought life had finally lost all respect for timing. She cried in the parking lot before she even started the car. Not because she was unhappy, because the one thing Kingston had used to justify destroying her had turned out to be a lie. When she told him, he did not believe her. Or rather, he refused to believe her in any way that required him to behave like a man. He demanded private testing. Evelyn whispered poison in his ear. Celeste stayed conveniently close. And before the official results could be quietly handled, a story leaked to entertainment blogs claiming Zariah was pregnant by an unknown man and trying to trap her wealthy ex-husband into fatherhood. Kingston had one chance then. One chance to say nothing until the facts were clear. One chance to protect a woman he had already humiliated enough. Instead, he stood outside a fundraiser with cameras in his face and said the words that would stain him long after the money faded. "I will not be blackmailed into claiming children that are not mine." Zariah saw the clip alone in her apartment. That night, she stopped hoping. The twins were born early, small and fierce, both fighting for every breath inside a neonatal unit full of machines that beeped louder than her fear. She named them Josiah and Justice because she wanted their names to carry strength, even if their father never did. And that might have been the end of Kingston Vale in their story, if not for one man who still understood shame. Augustus Vale, Kingston's grandfather. The old patriarch had built the family empire when deals were made with handshakes instead of brand managers. He was not a gentleman, but he recognized truth when he saw it. He came to the hospital without cameras, without assistance, without permission from his son or daughter-in-law. He stood outside the nursery window, staring at the twins for a long time. Then he asked Zariah one question. Did my grandson fail them before they were even born? Zariah looked at the old man and said, he failed them the moment he valued his image over the truth. Augustus nodded like a man receiving a verdict he already suspected. Within weeks, he ordered an independent investigation through a private legal and medical team. What they found never made the news. Fertility records had been tampered with. Communication from the clinic had been intercepted. A lab coordinator had accepted money routed through shell accounts tied back to Evelyn Vale's personal foundation. The original paternity confirmation had been delayed just long enough for Kingston to go public with his denial. In simple terms, his mother had manipulated the truth. In more painful terms, Kingston had wanted an excuse badly enough to use it. Augustus offered Zariah money, a home, protection. She refused almost all of it. Not because she did not need help, but because she understood the price wealthy families attached to gratitude. The only thing she accepted was a private educational trust for the twins, one that could not be touched, revoked, or spun into charity later. Augustus admired that. Before his death, he changed his will. Not publicly, not dramatically, strategically. If Kingston ever continued to deny his first biological children past the date of their 6th birthday, a controlling block of Vale Urban Holdings would transfer into a protected trust governed on behalf of those children, with Zariah Bennett as sole trustee until they came of age. The triggering disclosure, according to Augustus's written instructions, had to occur at the next ceremonial event in which Kingston attempted to present himself as the moral future of the family. That event turned out to be his wedding. Back in the cathedral, the attorney removed several documents from the envelope and began reading aloud. DNA confirmation, financial trails, authenticated clinic correspondence, the codicil, the trust structure, the transfer provisions. Every sentence hit the room like a hammer. Celeste's father sat back slowly, the expression on his face changing from irritation to calculation. Because rich men can forgive scandal faster than they can forgive risk. And this was risk. Kingston moved toward the attorney. You cannot do this here. The attorney looked at him almost sadly. Your grandfather believed truth belonged wherever lies had performed best. Celeste turned to Kingston. You told me she made all of this up. He opened his mouth and discovered that panic had finally taken the place of language. Evelyn Vale rose from her seat, trembling with outrage. This is extortion! That woman has been plotting against this family for years! Zariah faced her without flinching. No, she said. I was rebuilding my life while you were rewriting records. The attorney slid one final document across a small side table near the altar. Mrs. Vale, your signature authorization appears on 3 financial transfers connected to the clinic intermediary. The room went silent. Not shocked silent. Dead silent. The kind of silence that happens when power realizes it has left fingerprints. Kingston looked at his mother. Really looked at her. Maybe for the first time in his life, he saw the machinery behind the excuses he had used so easily. Maybe he understood, in that tiny collapsing moment, that she had handed him a lie, but he had still chosen to wear it because it made betrayal convenient. His eyes moved to the twins. Josiah stood straight, one hand still in Zariah's. Justice looked back at him without fear, only curiosity, as if this expensive stranger at the altar were just another adult learning too late that truth does not disappear because you refuse to name it. Kingston's voice came out rough. "They're mine?" Zariah almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable that a man could destroy so much and still ask the question like he deserved a gentle answer. "They were always yours," she said. "You just loved your reputation more." Celeste stepped away from him then. Not dramatically, not with shouting. Somehow that made it worse. She removed her engagement ring and set it on the open Bible near the minister.
"So this wedding was built on a lie,"
she said. Kingston reached for her. "Celeste, wait." But Celeste Monroe had not been raised to marry into sinking ships. Her father was already on the phone with counsel before she had even cleared the front aisle. One by one, investors slipped out behind him. Then donors. Then the city councilman who had been smiling for photos an hour earlier. Because scandal attracts attention, but proven dishonor terrifies money. Kingston watched his future leave row by row. And for the first time, he looked smaller than the room around him. He turned back to Zariah, no cameras left to impress, no speeches left to hide behind. "I was wrong." She said nothing. "I was lied to." That made her eyes sharpen. "No," she said softly. "You were offered a lie, and you accepted it because it protected what you wanted. Don't confuse manipulation with innocence." His shoulders dropped. "What do you want from me?" That question had everything in it. Fear, shame, desperation. Maybe even a little regret. But it was too late for any of those things to matter in the way he wanted. Zariah looked down at the boys, then back at the man who had denied them before they ever had a chance to say the word father. "I didn't come for revenge," she said. "I came for recognition, for legal truth, for their future to stop depending on your convenience." The attorney cleared his throat. "Under the terms of the trust, Mrs. Bennett now holds controlling authority over the transferred shares on behalf of the minors." Kingston blinked. "She controls the company?" "Enough of it," the attorney said, "to ensure these children are never erased again." It was almost poetic. The woman Kingston had discarded as unworthy of his legacy now held the power to protect it from him. Evelyn sat down hard, as if age had suddenly found her all at once. The minister quietly closed his book. The florist near the altar began removing petals from her shoes, pretending not to watch history rearrange itself in front of her. Zariah bent slightly and adjusted Justice's collar. Then she smoothed Josiah's shoulder with the tenderness of a mother who had spent 6 years turning pain into provision. When she stood again, there was no bitterness in her face. That was the part Kingston would remember most. Not rage, not cruelty. Peace. Because peace in the hands of the person you tried to break is a punishment pride never recovers from. The boys looked up at her, waiting. She gave them a small smile. "Come on, babies," she said. "We're done here." Kingston's voice cracked behind her. "Zariah." She paused, but did not turn around. "You didn't lose me today," she said. "You lost us the day you stood in front of cameras and called your own sons a rumor." Then she walked away. Down the same aisle his new bride had planned to own. Past the same guests who had once believed the worst about her because it came wrapped in wealth and male confidence. past the same doors that opened for scandal but closed on judgment. Outside, the sun hit the church steps in long bands of gold. The boys ran ahead a little, laughing now that the heavy part was over, their voices bright and alive in the afternoon air. Zariah watched them with the kind of pride no headline could ever touch. She had not needed a wedding to validate her. Not a surname. Not an apology shaped by panic. She had built a life out of wreckage, raised 2 boys out of betrayal, and walked back into the very place that once would have crushed a weaker woman, only to leave stronger, richer, and finally undeniable. And inside that cathedral, as guests whispered over ruined vows and collapsing alliances, Kingston Vale learned the lesson men like him always learn too late. A woman you discard to protect your ego can become the very truth that destroys it.